Operation Acoustic Kitty. In 1960, Langley, Virginia, the CIA had a problem. Soviet officials loved to meet in parks. Open air, no walls, no windows, nearly impossible to bug. So someone at the agency had an idea. What if the bug could walk there on its own? They decided to use a cat. Over 5 years and roughly $20 million, CIA scientists surgically implanted a microphone into a cat's ear canal, a small transmitter at the base of its skull, and a thin antenna wire woven through its fur along its tail. The project was called Operation Acoustic Kitty. The legend goes that in its first field test, the cat was released near a park and immediately hit by a taxi. A former CIA officer who told that story later admitted it was a joke. Declassified reports suggest a less cinematic end. The cat simply wouldn't do what it was told. It wandered off looking for food instead of Soviet secrets. The CIA shut the program down in 1967. A declassified memo concluded the concept was not practical. Even $20 million can't make a cat follow orders. The Great Seal Bug. On the 4th of August, 1945, Moscow, a group of Soviet schoolchildren presented the American ambassador with a gift, a hand-carved wooden replica of the Great Seal of the United States. Moved by the gesture, the ambassador hung it on the wall of his study in Spaso House. It stayed there for 7 years, watching every high-level meeting. Inside the seal was a device so advanced that Western intelligence didn't understand it for years. It had no battery and no active electronics. Soviet operatives in a van outside would aim a high-frequency radio beam at the building, which powered a tiny capacitive membrane inside the carving to transmit the room's audio. Without that external beam, the device was dead and invisible to any sweep. It was designed by Leon Theremin, the same man who invented the theremin musical instrument, working in a Soviet secret laboratory. The Americans discovered it in 1951 when a British radio operator accidentally picked up the ambassador's voice on an open Soviet Air Force frequency. The CIA later admitted it changed the way they thought about surveillance forever. The Ghost Army. 1944, across Western Europe, the U.S. Army created a secret unit called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. They weren't career soldiers. They were artists, fashion designers, actors, and sound engineers. Their weapons were inflatables. Equipped with rubber tanks, jeeps, and airplanes, they could simulate an entire armored division in hours. From a German reconnaissance plane, it looked like a massive force massing for attack. To sell the illusion, they used giant speakers to blast the sounds of moving tanks and construction, audible 15 miles away. Their most successful operation was at the Rhine in 1945. Over 600 inflatable vehicles convinced the Germans to defend the wrong crossing point. While the enemy shelled the balloons, the real U.S. Ninth Army crossed miles away with minimal resistance. The Ghost Army is estimated to have saved between 15,000 and 30,000 lives. Their work remained classified for over 50 years. Operation Gold, the Berlin Tunnel, 1954, Berlin, Germany. The CIA and MI6 dug a tunnel nearly half a kilometer long from West Berlin into the Soviet sector to tap into Red Army telephone lines. Construction took 8 months. For 11 months after that, Western intelligence intercepted roughly 90,000 conversations. It was hailed as one of the greatest intelligence coups of the Cold War. The Soviets had known about it before the first shovel hit the dirt. A KGB mole named George Blake, working inside MI6, had tipped off Moscow from day one. To protect his cover, the Soviets let the operation run for nearly a year, and crucially, kept the tapped lines flowing with genuine intelligence rather than disinformation, to avoid raising suspicion. In 1956, they staged a theatrical discovery of the tunnel to embarrass the West. It was a hall of mirrors where the spies were the ones being spied on. Operation Mincemeat. On the 30th of April, 1943, off the coast of Huelva, Spain, a fisherman spotted a body floating in the sea. A British officer, apparently killed in a plane crash, with a briefcase containing top-secret letters revealing that the Allied invasion of Europe would target Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. The body was a lie. The man had never been an officer. His name on paper was Major William Martin. In reality, he was Glyndwr Michael, a homeless man from Wales who had died in London after eating rat poison. Whether by suicide or accident, no one ever established with certainty. British intelligence had dressed his corpse in a uniform and fabricated an entire identity, a fake fiancée named Pam, a bill for an engagement ring in his pocket. They dropped him off the Spanish coast, knowing the pro-German authorities would hand the papers to the Nazis. It worked perfectly. Hitler personally ordered the defense of Greece, moving vital panzer divisions away from Sicily. When the Allies landed there in July 1943, they found the island far less defended than expected. The man who never was had saved thousands of lives. The Farewell Dossier. In early 1981, Paris, France, a KGB colonel named Vladimir Vetrov made contact with French intelligence and offered to spy for the West. Disillusioned with the Soviet system, he passed over 4,000 documents to French intelligence, who shared them with the Reagan administration. The documents revealed a massive Soviet operation to steal Western technology. The CIA's response was to let them keep stealing, but feed them sabotaged goods, chips designed to fail after a few months. Turbine blueprints subtly altered to cause long-term stress. Software that would behave normally until it didn't. According to CIA accounts, this contributed to a massive 1982 explosion of a natural gas pipeline in Siberia, allegedly the largest non-nuclear explosion ever seen from space. Historians debate whether the sabotage or poor Soviet maintenance caused it. Either way, the operation was real. It sowed so much paranoia that the Soviets no longer knew which of their stolen secrets they could actually trust. Project Azorian. On the 8th of March 1968, the North Pacific Ocean. The Soviet nuclear submarine K-129 sank in the Pacific. The Soviets couldn't find it. The Americans, using underwater microphones, located it 3 miles down. The CIA wanted the codebooks and nuclear missiles aboard, but raising a submarine from that depth was considered impossible. To hide the operation, they recruited the world's most famous recluse, Howard Hughes. The cover story was that Hughes was building a vast ship called the Glomar Explorer to mine manganese nodules from the seafloor. In reality, it was built around a giant mechanical claw. In 1974, the claw descended 5 kilometers and grabbed the submarine. As it was being hauled up, the mechanism sheared under the strain. 2/3 of the vessel, including the sections with the missiles and codes, broke away and fell back to the ocean floor. The CIA recovered only the forward section. Despite the partial failure, it remains the deepest and most expensive salvage operation in history. When the story leaked, the agency responded with a phrase now embedded in intelligence lore: "We can neither confirm nor deny." The Umbrella Assassination. On the 7th of September 1978, Waterloo Bridge, London, Georgy Markov, a Bulgarian dissident working for the BBC, was waiting at a bus stop when he felt a sharp sting in his thigh. He turned to see a man picking up an umbrella. The man apologized and hurried into a taxi. Markov developed a massive fever and died 4 days later. Doctors found a tiny pellet embedded in his leg, no bigger than a pinhead, made of platinum and iridium, with 2 small holes drilled into it. The pellet was believed to have contained ricin, a poison with no known antidote, though no trace of the substance could be recovered from the pellet itself. The umbrella had been a custom-built pneumatic gun, developed by the Bulgarian Secret Service with KGB assistance, designed to fire the pellet without a sound. A cold-blooded assassination carried out in broad daylight on a London street. It remains the most famous spy gadget killing in history. Operation Midnight Climax. 1953 to 1963, San Francisco, California. As part of the broader MK Ultra project, the CIA set up safe houses in San Francisco and New York to test whether LSD and other drugs could be used as interrogation tools or social weapons. They hired sex workers to bring unsuspecting men to these locations. From behind two-way mirrors, CIA agents watched as their targets were dosed with LSD without their knowledge or consent. The project was led by George Hunter White, a federal narcotics agent who later wrote that it was a laboratory where anything goes. It was completely illegal, entirely unethical, and eventually shut down when the CIA began to fear legal exposure. Most of the files were destroyed in 1973 on the orders of CIA Director Richard Helms. What survived is a reminder of how far the agency was willing to go in the name of national security, and how little accountability existed for those who went there. Project Pigeon, 1943 to 1953, various locations, USA. Before reliable electronic guidance systems existed, the U.S. military struggled to make missiles hit their targets. A world-famous psychologist named B.F. Skinner had a solution: Project Pigeon. He proposed placing trained pigeons inside the nose cone of a missile. A set of lenses would project an image of the target onto a screen in front of the birds. Skinner used operant conditioning to train them to peck at the image. As long as the pecks were centered, the missile flew straight. If the target drifted, the pecks would mechanically adjust the fins to steer it back on course. The system actually worked with startling accuracy in tests. The pigeons were calm under pressure, even when the missile was accelerating. The military canceled the project in 1944, not because they found the idea amusing, but because competing weapons programs were seen as more immediately promising. The Navy revived it in 1948 under the name Project Orkan, before finally abandoning it in 1953 when electronic guidance systems proved more reliable than birds. The Hollow Nickel Case, June 1953, Brooklyn, New York. One of the most effective Soviet spy rings in America was brought down by a single 5-cent coin. A 14-year-old newspaper boy was collecting money for deliveries when he was handed a nickel that felt wrong. When he dropped it, the coin popped open. Inside was a tiny piece of microfilm containing a sequence of 5-digit numbers. The boy handed it to the FBI, but for 4 years, the government's best codebreakers couldn't crack the sequence. The breakthrough came in 1957 when a Soviet agent named Reino Hayhanen defected in Paris on his way back to Moscow. He provided the cipher key and identified his superior, a man living in Brooklyn under the name Emil Goldfuss. In reality, he was Rudolf Abel, a high-ranking KGB officer living as a photographer in a Brooklyn studio. Abel was convicted of espionage and eventually swapped for American U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers in the famous Bridge of Spies exchange on a Berlin bridge in 1962. It remains a reminder that during the Cold War, the most dangerous secrets were often hiding in plain sight, disguised as spare change. Project Iceworm, 1959 to 1966, Greenland. While the public was told that the U.S. was building a scientific research station called Camp Century in Greenland, the Pentagon was secretly working on a plan called Project Iceworm. The goal was to build a 2,500-mile-long tunnel network carved directly into the Arctic ice sheet, a hidden city designed to house up to 600 nuclear missiles that could hit the Soviet Union within minutes. The base was powered by a portable nuclear reactor, the first of its kind deployed by the U.S. Army. Soldiers lived underground in tunnels that contained a chapel, a theater, and a hobby shop buried deep beneath the surface. The project faced a force more powerful than the Soviets, the ice itself. Glaciologists discovered that the ice sheet was moving far faster than expected. The tunnels began to warp and collapse. The project was canceled in 1966 and the base abandoned. The reactor was removed, but thousands of gallons of diesel fuel, sewage, and toxic waste were left behind under the assumption the ice would entomb them forever. It won't. Scientists now estimate that by around 2090, meltwater could begin releasing that waste into the environment, the buried legacy of a secret nuclear city that was never supposed to be found. If you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.